We'll go ahead and stay in the NFL and look ahead to the NFL trade deadline. Tuesday is shaping up to be quite a day as we observe an election and an NFL trade deadline in the same day. We've already seen a few trades leading up to it. Yannick Ngakoue was sent to the Ravens after a cup of coffee in Minnesota. Carlos Dunlap moved on to Seattle, and Everson Griffin went to the Lions. However, there's a bunch of big names still available. Some are former Pro Bowlers and Player of the Year candidates, and some teams will be buying for a Super Bowl run, while others have already set their sights to 2021. So, Jay, how do you see this deadline shaping up? And give me some trades that interest you.
I think there's a couple teams who I look at that seem to be kind of interesting to me. I think Pittsburgh's one that hits me right away. The injury to Devin Bush, pretty significant. Their first round pick from last season, who's been very good for them, very good in coverage. He's out for the year with an ACL injury, I believe. When we looked at that Pittsburgh defense, if Devin Bush is healthy, that would be they don't have a hole. That's a locked and loaded championship defense to me. But if you're interested in maybe plugging that hole up, I think there's some veteran guys you can look at around the league that maybe you could get. I think Gerard Davis in Detroit. I think he's a guy that perhaps it appears has fallen out of favor up there, which we know how easy that can be with Matt Patricia up there. But Avery Williamson with the New York Jets. I mean, who is not for sale on the New York Jets? So I think those are a couple guys maybe Pittsburgh can look at and maybe filling that Devin Bush void. I think Seattle's another team. I think just defensively, period. Whether it's in the pass rush, whether it's perhaps at corner, I think they could be maybe one more player away. And I know they just got Jamal Adams, but that still doesn't seem quite yet to have done the trick. And you'd hate to squander another just outstanding season by Russell Wilson. That offense just playing at a really high level. But I don't know, maybe it's I know New England, there seems to be some rumors now that maybe Stephon Gilmore could be had. There's a plethora of defensive players that they can look at. I don't know, maybe you look at a guy like Takk McKinley from the Atlanta Falcons who he could possibly be on the move. But I definitely think in the pass rushing side of things, Seattle could definitely use some upgrades there, maybe to get that one play late in the game to finish things. They already did pick up Carlos Dunlap, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the player that puts them over the edge yet. The Saints, I think wide receiver is a position they need to continue to explore. I'm not quite sure what's going on with Michael Thomas right now. I'm not going to speculate, but what I will say is something's amiss right there. Something is not right. And because of that and the injuries they've been dealing with there, Emmanuel Sanders has been in and out. Now you have the young guy Marquez Callaway. I think he's going to be out for this upcoming game. So I think looking at veteran possession receiver and Drew Brees in those short to intermediate routes, maybe you look at a guy like Alshon Jeffrey out of Philadelphia, who I'm not sure what they're doing with him over there, but it doesn't appear to be much. And there's some other guys you can look at as well. Golden Tate, I think, speaking of, every player being for sale, I think the whole city of New York should be on a fire sale right now. So Golden Tate could be out of there. What about the Houston Texans? What about a Will Fuller? What about a Kenny Stills? You could look at one of those guys. And Drinks brought up, from time to time, the need for those guys to stretch the field. I think Will Fuller could be a guy that could fix that problem in an instant, provided we can actually get him on the football field. And I think the most fascinating team to watch at this deadline to see what they do one way or the other is the New England Patriots. I think I've been a little bit disappointed to see what I've seen so far from them. Even though I know when you looked at opt-outs coming into the season due to the coronavirus, I think they were the team that were absolutely hit the hardest with that. When you look at Dante Hightower, when you look at Marcus Cannon, Patrick Chung, the list goes on and on. But even so, I think 2-4 they're underachieving right now. And I think this is going to be a make or break game coming up this weekend against the Buffalo Bills. I think if they win that game, I think you look at Bill Belichick, I think he could talk himself into, continue to play out this season. But if you lose and fall, 3 or 4 games back, then you got to take a hard look at things and maybe considering getting rid of some of these veteran players and trying to build something for another run at things next year. Because they're not really in an advantageous position. And I think that game against the 49ers was really telling because they just got abused at the line of scrimmage and by that 49ers running attack. So they're going to be fascinating watch. But those are the 4 teams I would pay attention to coming up.
Yeah, so I definitely I agree with what Jay's saying with those 4 teams. For me, I kind of look more at the individual players rather than the teams. Like I'm surprised to hear that Michael Thomas is on the trade block. It was just before the season we was talking about when he got his contract. He was one of the dudes that deserved the type of contract he got. He deserved his extension, and now all of a sudden, you're not even halfway through the season, and you're looking to trade him for his attitude or whatever case might be. But it's a little bit surprising when you actually think about the fact that he just got his money. Stephon Gilmore, Defensive Player of the Year. We know what New England does, so this shouldn't be as surprising because New England, they handle business how they handle business. But this guy's a reigning Defensive Player of the Year as a cornerback, and they're looking to drop him. I'm a bit baffled with that. One name I do see on here, and I'm surprised he's not traded already, AJ Green. Listen, the guy just plain out not happy there in Cincinnati. There's no way you're going to convince me he is. I'm looking at his body language, the way he carried himself since the season started. There's no way you're going to tell me that this guy's A-okay with being in Cincinnati. I think it's time for him to pack his bags and move along. J.J. Watt, I think his ceiling with the Texans has come to a head. It's probably time for a new scenery there. I don't see much coming out of him staying with the Texans. So, you need pass rushing help. Why not go holler at him? And the same thing I say for like the likes of Alshon Jeffries. Look, listen, I don't think he want to play anymore. Not for the Eagles. I do think if he wanted to play for the Eagles, he would be playing for the Eagles. But he done made this very clear. I'm good. I'm good on all that. Got what I'm saying? Got his ring. I'm ready to move on. I don't know if it's something between him and Carson Wentz or him with the management, but clearly he's not trying to be there. So if I'm a team that needs that back of the end zone, tall wide receiver threat, why wouldn't I go out here and get Alshon Jeffrey? Now, I would have a little buyer's remorse, or I would be a little cautious because if he's doing that for the Eagles, I can only imagine if you're a bottom-feeding team and you got to get him, it could possibly happen to you where he don't want to be there as well. So that's some of the things I look at. But listen, it's that time, trade deadline. We'll see how the chips fall, but those are a couple of head scratchers where I'm like, either they should have been traded already, or why are they getting traded? Why would their names be out there right now? So that's how I look at that.
Yeah, the trade deadline as a whole this year, I think one interesting storyline from it is the looking ahead to 21 as far as the coronavirus and the potential for the salary cap to be reduced. I think that some teams are going to be looking at their books more than looking at the on-field production or lack thereof. I think we look at salary caps, there's a lot of teams that are projected to be heavily into the red. And what's really interesting is some contenders. So for example, the Steelers were brought up, and the Steelers you think they're obviously a contender. They've obviously played themselves into that position. But they're going to be in the red next season, like $20 million in the red already. And you think, okay, well, they need to make trades. They need to go out and get guys. And they might still do that. I mean, teams can make salary cap work, obviously. But I think some teams that might be contending might still be also thinking about next year and potentially trying to balance that could be tough. So they're going to have to be – some teams are going to have to be really smart, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, when they're looking at these players and looking at their future contracts. The two big ones I have one this also got mentioned was I think Stephon Gilmore of the Seahawks would be a home run if the Seahawks could figure it out. Now, the problem is the Seahawks have already traded their first and third round pick for Jamal Adams and their seventh round pick for Carlos Dunlap. I mean, you go ahead and get rid of your second round pick, which is about what Stephon Gilmore's buying price is going to be from the Patriots. I imagine they're not going to take anything less than that despite his age. He was Defensive Player of the Year last year. I mean, it's definitely – he's going to command a price, are you willing to basically gut your entire draft for 3 players? If you're that committed, if you really think this is it, this is your year to win the Super Bowl, I guess you do it. Because be honest with you, Jamal Adams or not, I mean, the Seahawks defense is terrible. I mean, Jamal Adams, like we've talked about, makes that Seahawks defense a lot better, but man, they're giving up 368 yards per game, and quarterbacks are averaging at 92.1 QBR against this defense. It's not good. And yeah, it's atrocious. I mean, they're giving up like 30 points a game. I mean, they're among the league worst, and they aren't going to win that many more games. Even when Jamal Adams comes back, he'll give you a game or two that you maybe wouldn't have won otherwise. Like, for example, I think they beat the Cardinals last week if they had Jamal Adams. I think there's one more play in that game that decides an overtime game that he makes. But you get a guy like Stephon Gilmore, that the dynamic there really changes. I think the Seahawks go from a really good team to a legitimate, no-kidding contender if that's the case. But it's going to be a very big price to do it. They might have to work in picks in the following draft, so we'll see. I think A.J. Green is another guy you could go to this. I mean, most receivers you could say could go to the Saints, especially if you're talking about putting Michael Thomas in the trade block. But I think A.J. Green would be fun to see on a really well-run, competent, legitimate, NFL team. I think that's something really Cincinnati's never really been, so it'd be fun to see him do that. But the Saints are another one of those teams. They're projected to be net minus $81 million in the cap. So can they trade for A.J. Green and then go out and sign him next year? I mean, is it a 1-year, half-year rental? Those kind of things you got to think about. I think a couple of quick hits. I like the Texans potentially moving J.J. Watt, Will Fuller, and Zach Cunningham could all be on the move. I think that's a team that's going to go ahead and just pack it in for the season. The Jets, like y'all said, should be selling everybody. Ryan Kerrigan to the Dolphins or even potentially the Seahawks. I think that Washington's got a just embarrassment of riches in that front seven, and we all know they're probably still not doing much this year. So Chase Young looks like the advertised product. Just get a pass rusher out of there for some extra picks. I think the Cardinals should be an active team at the trade deadline. I think David Njoku, tight ends, is still a hole in that team. Desmond King, a potential cornerback replacement if the Chargers want to go ahead and get rid of him. Maybe even a Justin Simmons if the Broncos are punting on the season. It could all be potential helps the Cardinals. And then, the Bucs look at the offensive line market. I think Riley Reid from Minnesota wants to maybe move. And then a sneaky one that I'll just say, the Jaguars, DJ Hayden, nickel corner, he's coming off IR. He's surprisingly good, and if a team is looking for nickel corner help, he may be kind of an under-the-radar guy that could really help a team that's looking to contend. But it's going to be a really interesting trade deadline, and overall, I'm really interested to see if we're going to have like a fireworks-like deadline where people are going like crazy, or if teams just kind of stay pat with the uncertainty of next season. It's going to be one to watch.